Most Texans players took a knee to protest owner Bob McNair's comment calling them inmates. Elaine Thompson, Associated Press. Top storylines: protest news, injury news, fantasy football, ATS betting tips, picks. Just as players' national anthem demonstrations were, for the most part, giving way to pure football matters, an NFL owner's ugly comment raised the ire of his players, who, after an emotional weekend in which they considered their options, responded with the majority taking a knee in protest during the national anthem. Bob McNair, the Texans' nearly 80-year-old owner, triggered an emotional weekend that culminated in the team-wide protest, with most linking arms and kneeling. Previously, Texans players had chosen to stand, partly out of respect for the owner. But, after meeting and rejecting options like removing the decals from their helmet and remaining in the locker room for the anthem, they came to the sideline. Many took a knee and linked arms before the game against the Seahawks at CenturyLink Field. McNair triggered this with his comment, reported in an ESPN expose of the recent players-owners meeting over the anthem, about inmates running the prison. Some players considered a walkout and about 10, including wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins, left the facility Friday. Although most were talked into returning by coaches, Hopkins' absence was directly related to McNair's comment. McNair has sought to clean up his mess, offering yet another statement Saturday after meeting with players. However, his apology to players did not go over well. The NFL Network's Ian Rapoport reports, McNair's effort at damage control included a statement in which he said, "As I said yesterday, I was not referring to our players when I made a very regretful comment during the owners' meetings last week. I was referring to the relationship between the league office and team owners and how they have been making significant strategic decisions affecting our league without adequate input from ownership over the past few years. I am truly sorry to the players for how this has impacted them and the perception that it has created of me, which could not be further from the truth. Our focus going forward, personally and as an organization, will be towards making meaningful progress regarding the social issues that mean so much to our players and our community." McNair's inflammatory comment came during the October 17 meeting in New York, in which players and owners sought to find a way to take their anthem demonstrations into community action after their message about social injustice and police brutality was lost in tweets and comments by President Trump and others. The ESPN story showed how divided owners are on the topic of the anthem, and, during that meeting, McNair reportedly said, "We can't have the inmates running the prison," and Washington Redskins owner Daniel Snyder was quoted as saying that 96% of Americans are for guys standing. Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones has said the players for his team will be benched if they do not stand. McNair's comments reminded a number of athletes of Donald Sterling, who was forced to sell the Los Angeles Clippers because of racist comments a few years ago. Richard Sherman of the Seahawks believes players would boycott if they had guaranteed contracts. "I appreciate when people like that show who they really are," Sherman said of McNair's comments. "More people in the world have to be that kind and that open about how they really feel so you can identify them, and make sure you stay away from those kind of people, and keep those people out of power. But, you know, of course they have to sit back and apologize, because it's politically correct to apologize. But eventually you have to take people for their word and for who they are. For most players, even when once we apologize, they still take what we said and judge us by it. So you should do the same with him." Against that backdrop, owners and players had planned to meet again this week, and on Saturday night invited NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, former San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick, and McNair to join them Monday in Philadelphia. Many players have been deeply troubled by the disturbing comments made by Texans owner Bob McNair, the players said in a statement. "It is ironic that such a quote would emerge in the midst of an ongoing struggle to highlight injustices suffered by people of color, including our nation's deeply flawed approach to criminal justice and inhumane treatment of imprisoned people." However, the meeting reportedly was postponed to a later date Sunday afternoon. As far as anthem protests go, the San Francisco 49ers continue to lead the way, with 7 active or inactive players taking a knee. For the Philadelphia Eagles, Malcolm Jenkins and Rodney McLeod raised a fist, with teammate Chris Long standing with them in support. Top storylines in Chicago, Bears tight end Zach Miller suffered insult and injury on the same play. He hauled in a 25-yard touchdown pass from Mitchell Trubisky, but his leg bent in a gruesome way as he came down and he was taken off on a cart. You can see the injury here. We're not including the image because it's actually nauseating. As he was leaving, review showed that the ball had hit the ground and the touchdown was nullified. Pity the officials who had to look at the injury over and over. The Bears came into the game against the 42 Saints on a 12-game winning streak. The day began with a business-as-usual game from the Cleveland Browns, who flew to London and lost 3,316 to the Minnesota Vikings. Although the winless Browns led 13-12 at the half, the Vikings had no trouble after that, with Case Keenum completing 27 of 43 passes for 288 yards and 2 touchdowns with 1 interception. The Browns' Deshaun Kaiser completed 18 of 34 passes for 179 yards. Elsewhere in the NFL, 21 teams began the day a .500 or better record, and that means that this week's slate of games features no matchup in which both teams have a winning record. Still, the week isn't awash and plenty of games are worth keeping an eye on in an unsettled NFL season, memorable so far for significant injuries to star players and national anthem demonstrations about social injustice that have empowered the men who play the game even as they've drawn the ire of the president. With their quarterback once again making more headlines for his petulance than his playmaking, the Carolina Panthers take a 12-game losing streak into their game against Tampa Bay. Cam Newton, who earlier this month apologized to a female reporter and last week skipped media availability, walked off the podium Wednesday after getting a question he didn't care to answer from a different reporter. The Falcons, who failed to convince anyone that the Patriots don't still remain in their heads after last week's Sunday night loss in a regular season rematch, will try to end a 3-game losing streak and get above .500 with a game against the surprising in a good way this year New York Jets, in New Jersey, where the forecast calls for a rainy, chilly day. The Jets come into the game on a 12-game losing streak. In New England, there's more rain in the forecast, and the Patriots hope to go into their bye week with a 62 record. The Los Angeles Chargers, though, have won 3 games in a row after an 0-4 start. The 42 Bills will hope to keep pace in the NFC East, hosting the 34 Oakland Raiders. The 25 Indianapolis Colts travel to Cincinnati for a game against the 24 Bengals. In the other late afternoon games, see Houston-Seattle above. The Dallas Cowboys play the Washington Redskins, with both teams at 33 in the NFC and hoping to remain in the chase, with the Eagles, who play the winless 49ers in Philly at 61. The Redskins have injuries at a number of key positions. See below. The Cowboys have running back Ezekiel Elliott, which may be key with a forecast that calls for a rainy and cool afternoon in Landover, MD. Sunday night's game promises a little more competitive matchup than last week's New England-Atlanta affair, with 52 Pittsburgh playing Detroit, trying to end a 12-game losing streak and make noise in the NFC North. The Steelers have been a soap opera this season. Imagine how much Coach Mike Tomlin loves that. Wide receiver Martavis Bryant will not play after a week in which he repeated a trade request on social media, a decision that ended with him on the scout team pretending to be a Lions receiver for the defense during practice. He just has to earn his way back, fellow wide receiver Antonio Brown said. Obviously, we need him. We know what he's capable of. We're going to need him down the stretch. He made a mistake, and he'll learn from it. On Monday night, the 33 Denver Broncos play the 52 Chiefs in Kansas City in an important NFC West game. In other news, a Martellus Bennett bombshell. The Packers tight end writes on Instagram that helps pretty sure this will be his last NFL season. Read more. No review really needed. Game officials are supposed to eject players for hits like the one Kike Alonso did on Joe Flacco. Read more. It's Barr vs. Rodgers 2. Anthony Barr hits Aaron Rodgers again, saying this guy got all fooled, in what is now a he side. Hay said over just what happened when the Packers quarterback's collarbone broke 2 weeks ago. Read more. NFL Aries Mark Cuban predicted an NFL implosion because of greed. Now, he sees it accelerating. Read more. What to make of the Redskins. It's still too early to write off the Redskins or to declare them playoff worthy. Read more. Don't crown them just yet. The Seahawks aren't ready to cede the NFC West to the Rams. Read more. Still in beast mode, Marshawn Lynch spent part of his suspension putting a big hit on a high school player. Read more. Week 8 buys. The Cardinals, Packers, Jaguars, Rams, Giants and Titans are off. Injury news. Panthers linebacker Luke Kuechly has cleared the concussion protocol and, although he was still listed as questionable Friday, he is expected to play after practicing all week. Kuechly was injured in the October 12 loss to the Eagles and missed last week's game. The Redskins' injury report is extensive and, on Saturday, the team signed offensive lineman Orlando Franklin and guard Erico Uanchio, placed linebacker Pound Mason Foster on injured reserve and waived running back Mac Brown. 1 p.m. inactives include Ronald Darby ankle, Jordan Poyer knee, Alex Armah hamstring. Inactive players for 4 p.m. games: CJ Prosey's ankle, Luke Jokel knee. Fantasy football advice: best worst matchups at either end of the spectrum. We have Legarrette Blount and Des Bryant. Read more. The Atlanta Conundrum: should fantasy owners keep faith in the Falcons' broken offense? Read more. Week 8 cheat sheet: the choicest tips for Week 7. Read more. Week 8 starts set: expect Kareem Hunt's struggles to continue. Read more. The Fantasy Football Beat: the Post's fantasy football experts run down the trade fixes for your fantasy and reality teams. Listen. ATS betting tips: picks, the top trends and insights from Las Vegas. Read more.